And then that, there you go. But I'm wondering if your glitchy Wi-Fi might struggle it.
Okay, sounds good. No,
Okay,
it's good
so,
now. I hotspotted Daniel's phone.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay, I'll just re-add you as a host here. Okay.
All right, everyone. Well, welcome to Cutblock Layout webinar. So glad to have you all here. So yeah, we'll get started. We'll kind of give a minute here for everyone to join on. But today we're going to be going over Cutblock Layout. So what Cutblock Layout is, where it all starts, GPS data capture. We're going to have question periods throughout the webinar today. We'll go over what you get when you work with Forteck, weekly email updates. We'll go over hanging ribbon for layout, legislations and regulations. We'll be going over some stream layout, different classes in Alberta. We're going to discuss on safety, how we ensure safe working. We'll go over road layout and block reporting. We'll discuss pricing and some of the things that you get, and then some of our services, and then we'll open it up to a question period around Cutblock Layout at the end of the Zoom meeting. So,
And then before we get started, do you want to just double check the waiting room?
yeah, I think I just pulled it up in a little screen here on the side, so I should be able to keep letting people in.
Perfect.
So yeah, welcome Anila, welcome Brandon, welcome Akan, Myron Black, and we have a few more registered that should be joining us here shortly. Okay, so we'll get started. So Cutblock Layout webinar, July 21st, 2022. So what is Cutblock Layout? So Cutblock Layout, today we're going to talk specifically around Alberta Cutblock Layout practices. So there's some differences between British Columbia and Saskatchewan. We actively work in all three provinces, Western provinces, so Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. And in today's session, we're going to specifically talk about some of the Alberta specifics to Cutblock Layout. So to start off, what is Cutblock Layout? So Cutblock Layout is completed pre-harvest operations. So Cutblock Layout is defined as a process of flagging or locating the boundaries, buffers, deletions, retentions, and roads of areas that are to be logged. So where it all starts. So typically in Alberta, if you're one of the mills that have a forest management area or an FMA, you would get a spatial harvest sequence that is related to sequenced wood. So it's a government sequence that would be provided or to the mill based on the mill having an FMA area. And a spatial harvest sequence is basically just an AVI ran sequence that would say, hey, here's the 10-year sequence that where you're going to log in the next 10 years in this area, for example. So mill planner would typically get the SHS, so spatial harvest sequence, and then following that, the mill planner would typically plan the blocks and the roads and any additions and deletions. So they might take the spatial harvest sequence and delineate out different areas. So if there's something included in the SHS that maybe is non-merchantable, so if the mill has LiDAR, they can pull up the LiDAR files and see the tree heights, and if there's some areas that don't have any standing timber in them, then they can delineate those out through ArcGIS and edit the shape files. So then once the planning portion of the SHS is done, then typically there'd be a pre-commencement meeting with a consulting company, and unless the mill's doing layout internally, the Woodlands group, sometimes they do. But if they were, say, hiring us, for example, there'd be a startup meeting. So Forteck has a generic layout startup meeting template that if we have time, I'll go through at the end of this webinar. But basically just over the years, we've put together a list of all the generic things that you need to know when you're completing Cutblock Layout. And we just run through that with every client now. Typically, clients have Woodlands groups will have their own startup meetings that are required for sign off. A lot of times it's EMS documents, things like that they would be going through. But yeah, we have our own standard startup meeting that that we go through as well. So once the startup meeting's completed, then during that startup meeting, we'll make sure that we have all client relevant startup documents. So EMS documents, layout procedures, road layout procedures, depends on the mill, but they may have a lot of different types of documents. If they have any other documents that we should be looking at, such as species at risk or typically operating ground rules would be there. We'd make sure to review all those in detail with the crew that's going to be completing the layout prior to starting the work. So the next step in the process of layout would be dedicating a crew to the project. So ensuring that the crew is confident in completing layout, that they're confident in the client specs, that they've gone through all the startup document training, and that they're the right person for the job, and that the logistics are figured out as to where they'll be staying, whether that be an hotel, oil field camp, camper trailer, or whatever various other accommodations that may come across. So once we get going with the layout process, we provide weekly updates to all our clients. So every Monday, typically they get sent out, sometimes Sunday or Tuesday, but typically we target Monday, send out a weekly update to the client, just giving them an update of where we're at on the progress of the project, and giving them the opportunity to view the field data collected. So quality control completed on a regular duration across the shift or project. And then at the end of the project, there'll be a GPS data compilation, block card compilation, and a final review and submission. So GPS data capture. One of the main things that we use for capturing data is Arc Collector. Secondary program to that can be utilized is field maps. So these are both Esri programs. I know Trimble has some programs. There's a lot of different programs out there that people use, but for us specifically, we use Arc Collector. We've been utilizing that since about 2016, and we found it to work pretty well for the most part. So some of the benefits that we found with utilizing Arc Collector is you can import a client's data dictionary. So if you use Avenza, for example, it's not as easy to have a data dictionary. So with Arc Collector, we're able to utilize the client's data dictionary, so that when they get the finalized submission, if we set it up right, it can just match exactly the fields that they have in their, say, boundary layout lineal feature. And it's easier for them to enter it into their database if it matches what their database is. So LiDAR and base maps, one thing that's really cool with our collector is we actually have it set up now so that we can import LiDAR into the maps. So when our staff download the maps, they can actually see the bare earth, tree height, and wet areas mapping, slope as a base map right on their iPad or Android device, whichever they're using. Land use. So yeah, typically we have land use on every map. So that would show where all the pipeline agreements are, where all the lease sites are, where all the right of ways are, any LOCs. So that's very, very helpful for our staff when they're doing layout. They can determine, hey, there's going to be a pipeline crossing that we got to put in if we go across that way with the road versus if we come in from the west side, maybe there's no pipeline and we could avoid a pipeline crossing, which is extra expense for the client. So some other things that we add to our collector map is we have a view link. So we give all of our clients a view link where they can be okay. It says my internet's being unstable. Well, I'll take that as a yes. So yeah, we provide a collector view link so that our clients can click that and be able to see the basis, which we've had really great feedback on. They can continuously see what's been collected. So every night when the crew comes into service, they sync their maps. So they just hit the little sync button, and then the client can view through the view link all the boundary lines that have been collected, all the roads that have been laid out. In theory, if we have the LiDAR on there, they should be able to see the bare earth and the slopes, and they can, if we set it up right, they can actually drop points to say like, hey, why is, according to the LiDAR map, it shows that you're over percent slope on the road grade. Why did you go that way? So the client could review that and ask questions on an ongoing basis rather than just getting a submission at the end of the project and then having to go back or something when the crew's already gone from the area. So yeah, it's been we've had a lot of benefits to using our collector, and I highly recommend it. So yeah, that's some of the benefits that we've seen over the years. Yeah, so just wanted to say that if anyone has any questions at any time, you should be able to raise your hand in the hand button, and then Riley, if you just want to unmute them or let me know and I can unmute them. So yeah, right now, if anyone has any questions so far, feel free to raise your hand on the topics that have been discussed and I'll unmute you. If not, we'll move to the next slide. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so what you get when you work with Forteck for Cutblock Layout. So Forteck has a focus on quality, safety, and accuracy. So some of the things that you get is we are core certified in Alberta. So we've upgraded from C Core to Core a couple of years ago. We also are certified for Safe BC and Safety Certified in Saskatchewan. You get a dedicated safety manager available for all staff and clients. So if there's any incidences, she'll be doing incident reviews. She reviews every like near miss. If there's any updates that anyone wants done to our safety plan, things like that, our safety manager is always available. So while she can do site visits and make sure that our crew has all the required safety documents with them and safety equipment with them. We have a fleet manager, so that's Trevor. Trevor's our fleet manager. He's located up in High Level. Trevor ensures regular maintenance of all equipment. So he makes sure that everything is maintained regularly. If there's any equipment damages or issues, he can swap out machines overnight so we don't lose any downtime. And then he fixes them at his place and transports to our main staging locations, which would be Manning, High Level, and Morinville. Dedicated project manager. So for every project, we have a project manager that would be in communication with you as a client, and as well as they would be in communication with the employees, so coordinating all the logistics, making sure that accuracy is and quality and safety is all being achieved. Weekly updates. So project manager also sends weekly updates, which goes over just a list of sort of the 8 or 9 most important things that should be reviewed on a weekly basis. So we also have competent workforce, primarily consisting of RPFTs, RPFs, PBIOs. We have some other staff like natural resources, environmental sciences, things like that. We complete greater than 10% quality control by senior management or a third-party contractor on all projects, and we will increase that to 25% or more for new staff members. So everyone gets a collector view link to view the progress and quality of the projects on a daily basis. Data submission to desired specifications. Detailed georeference maps, blocks, and road reports for every project. So here's an example of one of our weekly updates. So each week for every project, our project manager sends in a update. So here's sort of what's included in that update. So provide an overview statement of the past week and an update on what's going on in the next week. I guess first we provide a collector view link if we're using collector. We provide information on what the tentative shift plan is for the next week and month for anyone on the project. We provide information around production information. So most of our layout guys in Alberta typically do between 3 to 7 kilometers of layout a day. Sort of depends on the ground conditions that they're in, how productive the person is, what the access is like, the slopes are like. Yeah, a lot of factors that come into production, but it's sort of the range. Most of our gig guys try to aim around 5 kilometers a day, but sort of depends on the area and the ground conditions. Projected timeline to complete project areas. So that's obviously important if you're a mill planner. You want to know, hey, when are you guys going to have this done? When are we going to see the submission? So you would get updated on that weekly as to where we're at and when you can expect things. So every week we provide an update on what quality control has been completed. So as I mentioned before, we have a target of 10% minimum, and we'll go up to 25% for newer staff. And then we include what safety reporting's been completed in the last week. What is the plan for the next week? So that's really important. We like to make sure that we have a great safety plan and that we're reporting, near misses as they happen consistently, ensuring that we have more near misses than we have incidents, ensuring that we're doing tailgates every morning. We actually had a scenario a few years ago where someone didn't check in at the end of the day, and they were working alone, and they'd completely on to the tailgate meeting, and we were able to radio them and get a hold of them. So weekly updates continued. Some more stuff that's included in our Forteck Weekly Update. for layout projects and for any project that we do. We provide a weekly update. So it'd be any incoming access or logistical concerns, questions on the project from the crew. We outline the mid-project orientation and quality discussion to be completed. So for us to ensure quality, we plan to review the specs every 2 weeks with every crew on every project, just to make sure that if things change or the crew's running into different concerns, that they're on top of exactly what the client wants to see out there. So the project's completed, and the weekly update will include this proposed submission date, and we'll try to set up a project debrief with the client just to discuss how the project went and gather information on how we could do better in the future. So our recorded, and then we have a typed out startup document that would be reviewed and signed by all staff. We provide weekly update on equipment maintenance, and if there's any additional services that we think we could help the client with, we'll let them know that as well. Okay, so getting into ribboning. So how to hang ribbon. I put this PowerPoint together myself just based on some of my knowledge, and if anyone has any additional input as to what they think could be beneficial to see, especially if you're in like a middle planning position or something, feel free to raise your hand in the chat and chime in at any time. So yeah, how to hang ribbon. So double knot your ribbon when you tie. So you just go up, double knot. And then if you're flagging boundary, have the ribbon facing into the block always. Flag the ribbon as high as possible. One thing to take in consideration if you're doing layout in the summer and it's going to be potentially an area that gets lots of snow in the winter, and maybe it's going to be logged in the winter, then you want to make sure that you're flagging as high as possible so that if they are logging in lots of snow, the ribbons aren't buried in snow, and that if snow is heavy, that it doesn't compress down the vegetation that you tie to. So kind of the next one on here is make sure that you tie to something that's going to stay standing. So you want to make sure that when you're tying, you're not just kind of small willows, shrubs, something where the ribbon's going to get knocked down if you know that the block's not going to be logged for say a couple of years, which so if that's the case, you want to make sure that you're tying even thicker and to more trees that are going to be standing longer, not just small shrubs, because if it's not going to be logged for 3 years, a lot of those could fall down if they're just tied to some smaller stems. So good rule of thumb is when you look back on your ribbon line, you always want to see a 2 to 3 ribbon at least. That's a pretty good standard for rule of thumb for ribbon thickness. If you have let's just say you're on a wet edge and you have a nice white spruce and or black spruce and you have a tamarack that is not commercially harvestable for the mill that you're working for example, then you'd want to tie to probably that tamarack or some other tree that's going to stay standing, but not necessarily be the one that you want to log, because some operators might not fall that tree if it could potentially be a boundary trespass. So something to consider. So yeah, any questions so far? Specific to the last couple of slides. Riley, do you know if they have option to raise their hands in here? And are you able to see that?
Yep, they should be able to.
Okay. I got a thumbs up. Do we have a chat bot then too there?
Yep, there's a chat block and there's a whole 9 yards. If anybody has any questions right now, if you just want to unmute your mic and have at her, and then we can answer any questions that you guys have.
Nope, I'm all good. I'm just trying to help out.
Yeah, you can feel free to type questions in the chat as well if that's preferred. Okay, so legislation and regulation. So some of the things that we like to look for when, or some of the main documents of legislation that we use is going to be the Alberta Timber Harvest Planning and Operating Ground Rules. So a lot of times those are client specific, but there is a standard Alberta ones. So if it's quota wood, typically you'd be on the Alberta standard ones. But if you're like, say, working for a specific client or a specific FMA holder, forest management holder, then they would most likely have their own ground rules, which it's important that you get the right ground rules because there may be, most likely there'll be different changes to their specs compared to the Alberta general ones. So things included in the timber harvest planning and operating ground rules are like all your creek buffers would be in there. So how to classify the creeks, how to buffer the creeks, the different creek distances, for example. So there's a lot of information in there. Basically, it's the main guideline that you would be using for layout, and you can't be in infraction of any of those outlined rules in there without permission from government. Species at risk, so it's something to always be aware of. Typically during all of our startup meetings, we would go through species at risk, making sure that we understand what species at risk might be in the areas that we're working, that we're identifying them. With our collector application, we're able to plot photos of different types of species at risk, sightings or tracks or something, and have them actually geolocated. So we can plot photos of, let's just say, a swan on the lake or a caribou track in the bush. We can plot a photo of that, so it's georeferenced to the exact location. I guess noxious weeds is another one as well that kind of falls closely to that. Client-specific EMS training, so that's always very important. A lot of times mills have certifications like FSC or SFI or CSA, so different types of client-specific, maybe like wood certifications or environmental certifications that have additional recommendations around things like retention or wildlife corridors, different stuff like that. So those are some of the main ones that we see a lot of. A lot of clients will have specific documents, not so much legislation, but specific documents on like how they want their ribbon hung and their ribbon colors. But yeah, the most common legislation that we always refer to is the timber harvest planning and operating ground rules. So here's some information from the Alberta generic timber harvest operating ground rules. So ephemeral stream. Streams are one of the main things when you're doing layout that are of utmost importance. Being able to understand how to classify them, and then the buffers associated with them, and making sure that you're in compliance with that legislation. So again, these can change depending on which client you're working for. So transitionals, for example, or a lot of companies are removing those from their operating ground rules, and they're just going straight from intermittent to small perm, usually over 50 centimeters. But anyway, so ephemeral is no defined channel, seasonal flow. So intermittent would be a 20 to 40 centimeter average channel width. Transitional is greater than 40 centimeters, but less than 70 centimeters. And a small perm is greater than 70 centimeters, but less than 5 meters. Large perm would be greater than 5 meters. So this would be basically, you want to find a representative spot on the channel. And what we recommend our crews do is to take out a measuring tape and measure it, flag a ribbon, a creek ribbon, typically a blue or something, where they're taking the measurement point at, and then actually we plot a photo of all creek locations or all measurement point locations on every creek. And ideally you plot it with the tape measure in there so that if there was ever an infraction, say government person went out and measured and said that, hey, I think it's actually a bigger creek, we would have documentation that says, hey, here's the exact channel width that we measured at this exact location on this date. And here's the 4 other measurements that all fell within the range of intermittent. So according to what it's outlined, to take, say, 4 measurements in the operating ground rules and be within 20 to 40 centimeters, that according to that, it's an intermittent creek, and here's our proof of it. So that's something that I think has been a really big game changer for our clients, is being able for us to have having the availability to plot photos of creek measurements with actual tape measurement in there. And so the client can have that information if there was ever some sort of dispute in the future. Sometimes a big rain event or something, even post-harvest, could change the creek, right? And so it's important to have previous documented information, or sometimes a beaver will come by and build a dam and flood the whole area out. So that information can be invaluable to the mill.
Myron had a question in the chat there, Brandon.
Yeah. Can you read it to me? I can't see it.
Sure. It says, what height would you consider as high enough to tie a ribbon in an area that has heavy snow in the winter months?
Yeah, so it's really going to depend on how heavy the snow is, where you're working, stuff like that. But a good rule of thumb is to reach as high as you can. So just always above your shoulders, or what I was always taught is above your shoulders. But ideally, if you know it's going to be winter and heavy snow, I mean, ideally tippy toe pretty much, and reach way above your head and tie it as high as you possibly can. It's not recommended to walk on blowdown or anything, so I wouldn't like try climbing up the tree or doing anything crazy like that. But definitely just flag it as high as you can above your head. And there may be times, like in mountainous terrain and stuff, if they're going to be logging in the winter, that it could be more snow than that. But usually they're going to have some struggles with logging if that's the case. So I would say most of the time, if you're reaching above your head, or at least above your shoulders, then that should be sufficient. Even for summer operations, I mean, a feller buncher is going to be up in his machine, right? So I don't know how that'd be, but probably, 6 feet up in the air. That's going to be, they're going to be looking down at the ribbon, even if it's above your shoulders, right? So you want it to be as high as close to eye level as you can get it when you're flagging ribbon height. Hopefully that helped answer that question. Buffer distance. So for ephemeral stream, you either center line with creek ribbon or kick it out of the block with boundary ribbon. The most common is to center line ephemerals. Some, depending on the operating ground rules, some companies in Alberta are not even required to center line them. But it really sort of depends on the operating ground rules that you're working under. Intermittent. So for an intermittent creek, you're required to leave lesser vegetation. So sometimes, depending on the operating ground rule specifications, that could be center lining it, or that could be kicking it out with boundary. Transitional. So if you go off the Alberta standard operating ground rules, it's going to be a 10-meter hard buffer. Like I mentioned, some mills or operating ground rules are changing, and they're completely getting rid of transitionals, and then the classes for intermittent and small perm, the channel widths are changing. But traditionally, transitionals are there, and they're that 0.4 to 0.7 of a meter, and then channel width, and then you would have a 10-meter hard buffer. No less than 10 is the big thing to note there. So all these buffers says 10 meter, 30 meter, 60 meter. That basically means no less than that. So you can't have like an 8-meter buffer on
Brandon, I think you might be having some Wi-Fi troubles.
More. So we can buffer again greater than 7 meter. See what I can do here.
Oh, it looks like it caught up now. It was just really glitchy for a hot minute there.
Okay. Yeah, if it continues at all, just let me know.
Okay.
Okay, so the next topic we're going to be moving into here is safety. So for Forteck, how we ensure safety is we document tailgates every single morning for every single project. So there's a list of questions that you go through, and the crew goes through them, answers the questions. They'll be like, what location are you working? Where's the nearest hospital? Does anyone have any allergies that we need to be aware of? Where's our staging area? What sort of potential hazards are we going to run into today? Is it weather? Is it cold? Is it heat? So it's very important to complete daily tailgate meetings. Hazard observations get completed on a regular basis. So that's if you notice something in the woods that you think could be a potential hazard. So say there's a heavy blowdown patch. So you can do a hazard observation saying, hey, there's a heavy blowdown patch, didn't seem safe to walk through. So documented the hazard and walked around it and flagged it out or something like that. Might be a good example. Near misses, so that would be if, say, someone slipped on a log, they tripped, no injury, but it could have led to an injury. So that would be a near miss. So our tailgates, hazard observations and near misses, we submit in our weekly updates to clients. Some of them don't care to see the tailgates, but for sure near misses get submitted every single week. And then incidents, if they happen, we report instantly to the client, definitely within 24 hours, but my rule of thumb is right away. And then we would do an incident investigation report with our safety manager, and we would get that submitted to the client, and we would consider if we need to do any updates to our safety plan. Just back on safety, I was just going to show you guys quickly. Site docs. So we use site docs. This is a program that we download on our phone. So all of our staff members have access to our site docs, and they're able to view all of our reports on there. They can fill out near misses, incidents, tailgates. If they fill them out and there's no service, as soon as they hit service, it'll upload. So it works really good. We have resources in there and stuff, reports, so I can go here and I can actually through and see reports happening every day. So the tailgates, any near misses, anything like that. And yeah, so we have workers, even a chat function, inbox. So all of our staff can see like our safety plan, can see our ATV inspections. They can complete truck inspections on their ATV inspections. They can, so yeah, it's pretty handy. I'm just on the web app here, but basically there's an app that you can download on your phone, and every crew can see all. Okay, so communication. We so our standard for communication during Cutblock Layout or for all forestry projects would be everyone has a radio. each crew has an inReach satellite communication device. We used to use satellite phones a lot more, but we went more towards each just to the compatibility to link to your phone and text messages through satellite. Everyone has a cell phone, and then we recommend everyone having a spare GPS device and a back. So I went over site.
Brandon, maybe try turning your video off and it might fix up your Wi-Fi connection there.
How does that sound?
Sounds better. We'll see how it works.
Okay. So road things to keep in mind. So yeah, I'm going to go over roading here. So allowable, adverse, and favorable road grades. So in general, what we see in Alberta is typically 12% favorable, 8% adverse. Those can change depending on which client we're working for, but those are pretty standard road grades for logging haul. Skidding distances. So usually it's going to be between 200 to 250 meters. So that would be how far the skidders are skidding the wood from the feller buncher where they drop the wood to deck roadside for loading. So yeah, usually 200 to 250 meters is pretty standard what we see. Some guys will push further than that. Some want it no more than 200. So when roading, some things to consider is keep the road and ribbon as straight as possible. Avoid sharp turns whenever possible. Avoid wet ground whenever possible, especially if there's any summer ground potential. So if you've identified that a block is potentially summer ground for logging, then definitely try to avoid wet ground and utilize it as a summer block if you can. Reduce watercourse crossing and utility crossings whenever possible. So one new service that we've started providing is utilizing RoadEng. So we have a RoadEng license, and we can actually, if the client has LiDAR, we can use bare earth LiDAR and run RoadEng scenarios to figure out the total cost for road build. Also can figure out the best quality road for cycle times and things like that. And that we can also ensure that the roads are built safely in a safe location. So those are kind of the three main things that could be added benefit of utilizing RoadEng for building road plans. So if anyone has any interest in that, you can let me know and we could talk about having us do that for you. Okay, so block reports. Some of the things typically included in block reports would be a detailed description of the block, including watercourse labeling and descriptions, volume estimates, tree sizes, DBH, species composition, general description of the block, addition and deletion information, so why you added off of the proposed shapefile or why you deleted out an area, seasonality of harvest, understory information that can be very beneficial for some clients if they want to protect understory, slopes and terrain, wildlife information. Is there any protected areas? Do you find any mineral licks, any bear dens, any raptor nests, anything that you protected in the block? Road notes. So with that can go like skidding and decking information, crossing types for creek crossings or pipeline crossings. And then as well, we can provide photos of the creeks, creek measurements and crossings, crossing photos. So yeah, pricing options. So we do either by the lineal meter or by the hectare for production. And then we'll also do day rate as the other option. Sort of depends on the ground we're working in and what the client prefers. We also have different options for our staff. So if you're interested in working with us, sometimes we pay based on day rate, or we may pay based on production, or we may do like a base rate that might be less than what a traditional day rate would be, and then a opportunity to earn a production incentive based on how much production you get out there. Our biggest thing is that if you're on production, we want to make sure that we're maintaining quality as well. So we have quality checks in place. We have, like I said, sometimes base with production. So if there's some challenging ground or something, that at least we're spending the time needed in there to make sure that it's being done well. And then with day rate, it's always important to make sure that everyone's being productive. So we monitor production and whatnot on a regular basis. So yeah, if you're interested in getting our rates, if you're someone that works in a mill and you're looking to add a layout contracting company, then you can contact myself here, brandon.siraka@forteck.ca, or our sales representative, nicole.siraka@forteck.ca. So yeah, again, what you get with our service is core safety certified in Alberta and safe certified in BC and Saskatchewan, dedicated safety manager, fleet manager, ensures equipment maintenance, dedicated project manager, weekly updates, competent workforce, primarily forestry professionals or biologists, greater than 10% quality control, collector view link for every project, so you can monitor the project as it moves along, and you can see what the quality is looking like and the production is looking like on a daily basis. Data submissions to desired specification and timelines, and a detailed georeference map, including block reports and road reports. So some additional services. So basically Forteck is capable of providing all services within the scope of forestry and environmental in Western Canada. The list of our services, of our main services currently, are below. If you have any additional contractor needs that aren't on this list, then you can feel free to reach out. So yeah, I'd like to move it into a question period here. If anyone has any questions, or if you want to book a meeting with myself or Nicole to discuss how we can help you out on your layout projects or other forestry projects, then here's our contact info here. And if you're on here and you're interested in Cutblock Layout and having a career with us, then you can email resume to careers@forteck.ca.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With all this LiDAR data that's coming your way, do you do any data sharing? Do you guys collect any of the data to help build any repositories for yourself or anything like that?
So we've been able, there's some government data that you can actually get that you can purchase. So we've done that in certain cases for specific jobs, but most of the LiDAR that we've been collecting has been for clients specifically, and they would have 100% ownership of that LiDAR, not us.
Cool, thank you.
But depending on the location, there may be the opportunity to ask them if they would be interested in selling their LiDAR for their location to help you out in a specific spot. Yeah. We actually just did a LiDAR project recently. We flew a bunch of LiDAR in northeastern BC, so that's actually new. I don't even think that was on our services list there, but we actually did it with plane and a LiDAR.
I missed the last half of that. You cut out a little bit.
Something that we recently doing.
Yeah, you might want to turn off your video again, Brandon.
I said, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just said that we've flown a bit of LiDAR the last little while here, last couple of weeks. So we're actually set up to do that as a service now.
Very cool. Very cool.
Some of you hopped in kind of partway through, so you might have missed some, but hey, is that better?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, I just switched Wi-Fi to see if that would work.
Can I jump in and ask a question about what you're looking for? Like I was having a look at your site that you're looking for residue surveyors. Are you looking for entry level people too? Or do you require experience? Can you tell me a bit about that? Sorry, I should introduce myself. It's Danielle from Work BC.
Hi. Yeah, so we are looking for in British Columbia for junior, intermediate, and senior waste and residue surveyors.
Okay.
So senior would be someone that has significant scaling experience and surveying experience, with residue surveying, and ideally have gone through the course this year,
Okay.
or within the last couple of years at a minimum.
Sure.
Intermediate would be someone that's has some experience either scaling or doing waste and residue, and maybe some forestry education, but isn't as it doesn't have 5+ years of doing it.
Sure.
And then a junior would be someone that's maybe newer out of school, or someone that has a fair bit of industry experience but no education.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's sort of the 3 different tiers that we look to hire for. And then we also have a field manager position, which would be someone that may run multiple projects for us.
Okay, sounds great. With any of those positions, just to keep in mind that with any of the tickets and that sort of thing that you're needing people to have, if you were to find the right applicant and they need that, connect with me, because it's often that I can help fund those tickets for you. And if you have an entry level person, I have a really good wage subsidy program right now to help compensate the wage to get you started. So connect with me if that's something that if you find an applicant that would be helpful with.
Okay, that sounds great. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions on layout, or just any generic questions is fine too? Anything related to Forteck or our services or forestry in general?
How long do these projects typically last? I mean, what's the turnaround time from start to finish? I mean, depending on the size, obviously, but do you have any data to support that?
Yeah, for sure. So our sort of target for our layout staff is anywhere between 60 to 100 kilometers per month of flagged ribbon, based on 20 days a month for Alberta layout. So that's sort of a good guideline. So it's all going to depend on project size. If we have projects that are a bit smaller, like say 50,000 meters cubed, then that might be done in 8 to 10 days with 2 guys for layout. If it's going to be a bit bigger, like say 100,000 meters cubed, then that would be pretty much double the man days. So yeah, I would say on average, like we have about 18 to 20 staff actively working in our Alberta forestry operations. And so if needed, like recently we pulled together a crew to do a helicopter job. So we just did I think it was 240 kilometers of layout we did in about 13 days. So if if you have a bigger project that you need multiple resources to say fill a helicopter or hit a deadline or something like that, we can pull our team together and do things quickly if needed, or if you say, hey, you know, maybe speed isn't the biggest thing for us, maybe it's quality and having it done by fall and regular QC checks and taking 3 or 4 months to do it, then maybe we put like a 2-person crew on a bigger project and do it over 3 months. So it's really going to depend on what the client's needs are, and we're very flexible to hit that client's requirements, whether that be lots of volume in a short under tight time frames, or whether that means you know, slower, steadier pace. Either way. Did that help clarify?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Stephen. Awesome. Well, if there's any other questions, feel free to type them into the chat, or raise your hand, or unmute yourself. That was covered most of what I wanted to go over today, and we're coming up to the hour here. One thing that I had that we could go over quickly is our Cutblock Layout startup meeting. So this is kind of a neat thing, but we have shared drives. So our Google Drive process, and then anyway, we have generic documents that can be so clients, and then general SOPs. And in here we have a bunch of SOPs for our staff, different things around getting directions with the Venza, onboarding checklists, our operating guidelines. So there's all sorts of stuff in here. And then like this would be a startup document. Layout startup meeting questions right here. I got it. See, we got another question here. Are you currently hiring overseas? Yeah, we are actually. We have 3 candidates that we've given formal offers to overseas that will be coming over to work in Canada with us on a 2-year contract shortly. We are looking for candidates that have forestry education and forestry experience as well. So here's an example of our layout startup meeting. So in here we would have, this gets completed for every layout project, but it's just to make sure that we don't miss anything. So do we have block and road shape files? Do we have predicted stream files? Do we have the LiDAR files? So bare earth, tree height, what area mapping, ortho, the DIDS layers, so the land use layers, contours, watershed protection files, other files. So example, cut blocks, cut lines, wildlife areas. So some of the questions we go through is EMS document reviewed by all staff. Let's say yes or no. A lot of these are yes and no questions, or just generic questions. So compartment name, project name, what FMA is it in? What operating ground rules do we use? What is the timeline of the project? So these are all very important questions that we've narrowed down and developed over the years to make sure that we don't miss anything. What season will this compartment be harvested in, and what year? We have, what is the access like? What is our retention strategy? Is there minimum block size retention if required? What kind of species of wood are we targeting? So is it conifer? Is it deciduous? What species specifically? What do they not take? What percentages? So yeah, what percentage of aspen is acceptable? What's the road plan? What way will the wood be flowing out during harvest and hauling? What is the favorable and adverse road conditions? What is the max block slope? What is the maximum skidding distance for skidder operations? What do you have to capture for block information? Information around beaver ponds and beaver floods, creeks, mountain pine beetle, timber volume estimates, understory, additions and deletions, any unique features, what is expected for submissions and deliverables, percentage of quality checks, how do you label the creeks on the map, what is the ribboning specs, what do you do around DLOs and LOCs, a bunch of stuff around creeks and creek benchmarks, tie points, is there any ribbonless features allowed? Do you want old ribbon ripped out if we find it? Do we have enough ribbon for the project? What do you want for safety reporting? And then some best practices, and then crew sign off at the end. So yeah, that's sort of our standard startup document. We've narrowed it down to these questions to just make sure that we don't miss anything for every Cutblock Layout startup meeting. Is there any questions on the layout startup or anything that anyone would see beneficial to additionally have in there?
At what rate do you guys review this once you start it up? Like, is this just the document and then everything else forms off of this, or do you keep coming back to it in the field and things like that?
Yeah, so we recommend our staff to download it for offline use on their GPS device or their cell phone, so they can review it out of service on a daily basis. And then we do mid-project, we call them mid-project orientations or quality discussions. But basically every 2 weeks on every project, the project manager or myself or a combination of us, we'll sit down and schedule like an hour quality discussion with the crew so that we can review this document. And we might even just like pull questions out ahead of time around specific specs, and then quiz the crew on the spot when they're in the meeting, and just see how they answer and see if we feel confident in what they're doing out there based off of that. And if we start to lose confidence at all, then we would do more quality checks than the 10%. We would push that up to like 25%. And if we're finding more issues, then we may even go above that. But I see it all the time. People will do a startup meeting and then the project will go on for 3 months and they'll add 2 or 3 people and forget to onboard them or orientate them or something. And we just make sure we don't do that. Make sure that everyone gets a project orientation when they start, that we do bi-weekly quality discussions. And I think it's really important because it's easy for people to get complacent when they're out there working and then kind of forget about the original discussion that there was maybe some specific that they could end up doing wrong if they're not paying attention. Did that answer your question?
Oh, certainly. And then some. Complacency kills. I appreciate it.
Yeah, right on. Could you please give us, so we got a question in the chat here. Could you please give us a brief information about the management plan and the guidelines your works? Yeah, so the management plan is typically built by, that's typically the Woodlands group that would be doing that work. So we're a consulting contracting company. We work for Woodlands groups, and usually the planning foresters there or the planning superintendent will be working more on the long-term management plans. So like the 100-year plans, things like that. Where we come in to actually help with that is we do have some staff that have experience with developing those plans. So the annual operating plans, final harvest plans, so the AOPs and FHPs. We have some staff that have worked for us or that currently work for us that have experience in developing those plans. And so we're actually able to help out as a contractor if a mill is understaffed in that regard. The other way that we help with long-term planning for like sustainable forest management, for example, would be by completing temporary sample plots, permanent sample plots, things like that. All that information that gets captured. So permanent sample plot typically gets measured every 10 years, say. you'd measure the same trees in that interval of time and figure out the height and the diameters and how much they grow over time. So that can get entered into like the 100-year plans to determine how fast the forest grows in specific FMAs, so forest management areas, over time. And then that can get calculated into figuring out sustainable forestry cuts per year, per area, or per stand type. And temporary sample plots are just a measurement done once, but it can give you a good overall idea of the forest inventory in the area to determine sustainable logging plans. Then obviously there's a lot of other factors that come in, like can you access all your wood? Is there too much slope in an area where we can't even get to that wood? So it's actually not loggable anyway. So it's not even allowable volume because we can't physically log it. Maybe there's section disease or fire that take out a bunch of your resource, and then you either need to excessively log for a while to salvage it, and then maybe reduce logging over years after. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that can come into play in regards to sort of long-term management plans and guidelines. I went over some of the legislation there. The most for layout, the main one that we use is the timber harvesting operating ground rules, specifically the Alberta timber harvesting operating ground rules, but it can be, each client has their own. So Danielle, I see your message there. It was great to have you on. Thanks for hopping on, and I got your information there, so it'd be great to connect. Amit, thanks for your question. Hopefully that helped answer it. If you had anything else in that regard, just let me know. All right, well, we are coming up over the hour here, so appreciate everyone attending today. Pretty good turnout for our first layout webinar, and hope you all have a good evening, and yeah, we'll have to do this again.
Stay tuned on our social media there, guys. We will have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, so keep following and stay tuned for our weekly emails and stuff for more information.
Yeah, and just back to the contact information here. Just share my screen quick again. I can figure that out.
I just plugged yours and Nicole's email in the chat there for anybody that has any questions.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Can you see my screen? So yeah, if you can see my screen there now. So if you're interested in working with us, you can email careers@forteck.ca. And if you are interested in having us complete work for you, you can contact myself or Nicole. Nicole's out of the office this week, but she'll be back on Monday. All right, thanks Riley for setting this up. We will close off this meeting and stay tuned for the next one. This should be posted on our social media, or you probably see a link to YouTube as well that we'll send out.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Brandon, if you want to end the meeting there, maybe you and I can just hop on quick after and kind of discuss. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.